Last year for Halloween, I had a poll that decided between two horror-themed MMOs, Requiem Memento Mori and Hellgate London. That ended up with me looking at Hellgate. So a new year rolls around and guess what I'll be looking at? If you guessed Requiem, you're wrong. Instead, I'll be breaking my own rules a second time with another game that you'd have to pay for. See, there's another horror-themed MMO out there that's quite recent, one that's not been doing too well despite being fairly well received among the critics. One that I've actively been playing since launch. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at The Secret World. Released in July of 2012, developed by Funcom and published, again in name only, by EA, Secret World ditches a lot of MMO norms by not only taking place in the modern-day Earth, but also by reworking the class and level system, but I'll get into that later. Despite the game's general critical success, poor sales believed to be caused by an average Metacritic score and the fervent anticipation of titles like Diablo 3, Guild Wars 2, and the upcoming Warcraft expansion Mists of Pandaria, it led to a major restructuring of Funcom. Many also lambasted the game's decision to be a purchased and subscription-based title, further driving this game back into a niche market. The story of The Secret World involves every conspiracy theorist's wet dream, where secret societies like the Illuminati, the Templars, and the Dragon are dealing with otherworldly threats and attempting to prevent the end of days, all while controlling the world from the shadows and shielding the truth from the general populace. You play as a recent initiate into one of these societies, as you've recently awakened into the power of Anima, a mysterious power that grants you superhuman abilities and borderline immortality, as you head out to hotspots around the globe dealing with threats and working your way through the ranks of your society. Story is at the forefront of this game, so despite the monetary wall of an initial purchase price and a subscription fee, hopefully what I tell you about this game will be enough to make you want to check it out. So, here we go. Considering this game takes place in modern day, it does its best to give people and areas a more realistic style. Character models remind me of what you'd see in many survival horror titles. Characters can be outright unpleasant to look at, and a lot of the time, that's the point. Faces of the characters are animated with the lines they speak, and they make a few various facial expressions, which occasionally comes across as off-putting, when it sometimes seems as if a character's lips don't want to open all the way when speaking. What this game has in spades is atmosphere. The first area of Kingsmouth is a fog-filled small town that will draw immediate memories of Silent Hill. Later areas like Egypt and Transylvania all lend to the feel of the missions that you're partaking in, all while feeling like a world that could actually exist. Lighting effects are fantastic as well, as parts of the game get nearly pitch black, giving you only a flashlight or some flares to navigate your way through the darkness. To render all this atmosphere, you need a pretty decent PC, especially if you want to crank the graphics up. This game supports DirectX 11 as well as 9, but if you're finding yourself getting frequent crashes when running it in 11, you might want to switch it back to 9. But even in lower settings, the game's graphics still do the job they need to. As a mature-themed MMO, there is a bit of nudity in characters, most notably the sea-dwelling Draug and the hell-spawned succubi, so keep that in mind if you're worried about younger players. Of course, besides the exposed breasts, these creatures come across as more disturbing and monstrous than actually attractive. Your character models cannot become nude, however, and Funcom seems to have an almost militant refusal to allow players to do this, immediately hotfixing bugs players exploited to allow their characters to walk around without clothing. It's a bit odd coming from the company behind Age of Conan, a game most noted for allowing you to do this. Also in the category of Age of Conan, the game is quite keen on gore, with plenty of bloody scenes, even if they're contained to cutscenes more than combat. There's a few graphical bugs in this game that happen, but unlike in Guild Wars 2, I find them more amusing than infuriating. One, occasionally a character's texture won't load, showing men as bald guys in boxer shorts, and women as bald and topless with smiley faces where their nipples should be. It was a lot more rampant during beta and early launch, but it doesn't seem to happen as often now. A second amusing bug that's pretty constant is when you go into sprint mode, the game doesn't immediately update the animation to your fast running speed, making your character trot around in hyperspeed like they're in a Benny Hill montage. And my personal favorite bug, when using an assault rifle and then immediately using a sword, sometimes the model won't switch out, and you'll be beating the hell out of your enemies with a gun instead. Otherwise, there's still a few low-res and texture-popping issues, so just expect that. So I say atmosphere enough, because that's really the key of this game, and the music backs that up well. The soundtrack does well to punctuate the settings you're in, often remaining very low-key or adding to the tension, or occasionally knowing when to cut out altogether and let the sound take over. This is also a title that plays a battle theme when enemies attack, but it ties in completely with the music that's currently playing. It also serves as a warning when you aggro nearby enemies, but I've heard it play on occasion only to look around and see nothing was actually coming for me. Sound design is a mixed bag. It serves itself excellently to punctuate atmosphere, as let me give you a small example from this quest here. Now, the problem lies in its use in combat. The effects seem very loud and stock, lending themselves to something sounding very bombastic and almost out of place. I've heard a lot of people complaining about this, and it's admittedly pretty jarring, but I don't mind it as much as others seem to. One major thing of note is the game's extensive voice work. Every NPC you speak with is voiced, and I absolutely love the voice work in this game. It's a game that you can really tell the VAs had a ton of fun in their roles. Memorable favorites of mine include Dr. Zern, the Illuminati scientist who, even only with a brief role during the tutorial, remains extremely memorable. Or the Paramedian, a weird soft-toned disembodied voice who speaks almost entirely in internet memes. It's actually quite amusing and not nearly as terrible as it sounds. Most notable to me is Illuminati representative and your main contact as an Illuminati player, Kristen Geary, who has this upbeat and yet serious tone of voice, the kind you'd expect from an office secretary despite her being rather unhinged.
Until one night in the hills, a couple of guys who were up to no good fucked with the wrong girl. But they didn't check me for mace or duct tape, and the next thing you know, it's all, "You can't do this to us, bitch, we're Illuminati." Now, I got to thinking, A, if you're a member of a secret society, you should keep that to yourself. Even under torture. I mean, seriously, cry me a river. And B, only my friends call me bitch.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to something you've probably noticed so far.
Those disgusting pigmen took whatever it was. Away into the fucking forest.
Fuck the world. Fuck Dracula and Mara and Lilith. Fuck everyone trying to turn the earth into their own twisted paradise.
Yeah, there's a lot of cursing in this game. A lot. Characters sprinkle in words like shit and fuck like seasoning, but it never becomes overly gratuitous. You might have noticed I try to hold back on the cursing on occasion, but with this game being a lot more open with it, at least it makes more sense for me not to hold back in this review. You have no idea how much of a fucking relief this is. Starting out the game, you have 3 character slots. That's it. It's enough for a character in all 3 factions, and I'll explain why this isn't that much of a big deal anyway. If you want more slots, they can be purchased from the website. You have a choice of a few servers, some marked for RP, and oddly enough, they seem to be the most populated. My original character rolled on Cerberus, which is originally marked as full, and it was the first server that opened, but now there's not much going on in it lately. Luckily, servers aren't set in stone, and you can hop servers easily by finding players from other servers in chat and joining up with them at your leisure. If you link the game to Facebook and have friends that play this game, it'll even be nice enough to let you know if your Facebook friends have characters on a particular server. You have a choice of 3 secret societies, the Illuminati, the Templars, and the Dragon. The only difference between them are their looks, location, access to decks, and certain quests in the game. It's pretty much a cosmetic choice as to which one you want to play as. The Illuminati run their society like a business, the Templar play more like a military order, and the Dragon are a bunch of anarchists who do whatever the fuck they want. Despite the Dragon's philosophy of causing chaos in order to manipulate the actions of the world being very much alongside my ideals, my main is Illuminati because they're the fucking Illuminati. Once chosen, you're taken to the character creator. It's limited but not stifling, giving you quite a few choices in hair color, faces, skin color, and a few tweaks in each. You also get to choose your main outfit in the game, and keep in mind you can purchase and unlock more outfits while you're playing. Once you create your character, you choose their name, in which you give them a first name, a nickname, and a last name. The nickname will be what your character is known as in-game. Despite the game giving you a warning that you shouldn't use your actual name if you want to protect your privacy, it's not like John Chaos D1 Burkhart isn't going to bring up any hits on Google, so I just went with it. It scares me how often I'm recognized in-game. You're taken to the game's opening that varies slightly depending on the faction you chose, but you'll always start out waking up in an apartment with a newfound psychic power, until one day a knock on your door invites you to join the society you chose. After that, you begin your trek to locate your faction and join their ranks. You'll notice this game is very Very story and cutscene heavy, all of which is penned by Ragnar Tornquist, whose writing credits include The Longest Journey, Broken Sword, and even an early Funcom MMO Anarchy Online. This is very much a game you play for the why, not the what. If you aren't a fan of story and MMOs, you are going to hate this game, which is a pity because it's simply fascinating if you're willing to follow along. During your opening mission, you'll end up going into the tutorial level via flashback, the method of which it's induced varies on your faction again. The Illuminati capture and drug you, the Templar hypnotize you during a street show, and the dragon... Yeah, that just happened. When the vision commences, you're taken to the real tutorial, which highlights the event in Tokyo that started the whole situation you're currently fighting against, as you inhabit the body of a young girl. You'll start with a shotgun and a few basic skills that unlock as you play the tutorial, teaching you the basics of combat as you progress. If you've completed this tutorial once before and wanted to save the time, you can run up the stairs in the beginning to click on the gate and skip it entirely. Combat controls are as follows. WASD moves. You click targets to attack them, and attack with hotkeys allocated 1 through 7, although later on you'll gain an 8th slot and I'll explain it when it comes time. Like City of Heroes, there are no auto-attack skills, so you need to click each time you want to use an attack. Unlike COH though, the skills don't always have a massive cooldown, and quite a few attacks can be spammed at your leisure. You can double tap in any direction to dodge, which plays a lot like Guild Wars 2, but with a longer cooldown. It's most useful for getting out of a bad situation, as enemies will usually telegraph their biggest attacks with a visible symbol on the ground that you can avoid if you move out of it in time. If you wish to get around faster, you can press X to switch into sprint mode, but this usually cancels out if you initiate combat or take a certain amount of damage when you're running past enemies. It's pretty much the Secret World equivalent to mounts and acts much in the same manner, even being upgradable to move faster for a fee. After this, you'll be tasked to visit the skill trainer, which gives you an introduction to the game's various weapon systems. Here you can choose your starting weapon, the idea being that you channel your anima through the weapon, which explains things like being able to use guns without ammunition. And they're pretty memorable even if this is the only time you really get to interact with them.
Never mind why this power has been awakened in you. You're not the only one, and you're not the chosen one. You're part of an army. Our army.
I see what you did there, Funcom. When you've chosen the weapon you wish to start with, return to the trainer and pick up your cell phone, which is how your faction contact will keep in touch with you, and also the way you can turn in completed quests. So you might be wondering why I skipped over classes. Well, there aren't any. One of the main features of this game is the fact that there are no set classes. While weapons do act like classes in a way, you can earn points on them at any time, and being allowed to mix and match your powers from 2 equipped weapon sets makes for some very interesting combinations and skills, allowing for a good amount of creative freedom in how you want to play your character. If you're the type of weirdo who always seems to want to use an assault rifle and yet still throw lightning at people, this game might be relevant to your interests. If you don't have all that much creativity, or want a good base to work from, there are several pre-built decks that you can work towards, and completing all skills in a deck will even unlock an outfit for your character. You unlock powers for your weapons on the ability wheel, with 2 tiers for each of the 3 weapon groups, ranged, melee, and magic. Each group has 3 weapons to choose from, ranged using pistols, rifles, and shotguns, melee using swords, hammers, and fist weapons, and magic being elementalist, blood, and chaos focuses. You unlock passive and active abilities which complement each other in various ways, and have 7 slots for each. You must unlock all abilities of a weapon's first tier before you can access the second tiers. Now, despite there being no classes, that doesn't mean there are no class roles. The holy trinity of tank, healer, and DPS remains fully intact. Some weapon sets like rifles and blood magic contain a lot of healing abilities, but that doesn't make them only good for healing. For example, the Illuminati Slayer deck uses swords and rifles for massive fast AoE and damage over time, while the Goon deck uses a lot of the sword's defensive tank skills. Same weapon, 2 completely different playstyles. Looking at the wheel and the massive amount of choices might make you think this is extremely easy to screw up, and choosing the wrong combo when you don't know any better can leave a lot of people feeling underpowered or useless. It's an easy trap to fall into, but talk to other players if you want some good tips to better start out. Do you want a fantastic newbie spec? Elementalism and Shotgun. Choose your starter weapon as Elementalist, and then put your early points into the shotgun skills Pump Action, Sawed Off, and Hit and Run, and you can take out massive groups of enemies while doing major damage to single targets that are a little tougher to take down. Here, just watch. And that's supposed to be one of the harder early quests. Each faction even has a deck that uses the elementalism and shotgun combo, making it something you can work toward as well. Much later, you can unlock an auxiliary slot, usually after a quest, which grants you an 8th slot for passive and active skills, and while powerful, they are very expensive points-wise to obtain. While later patches plan on implementing more auxiliary weapons, like the chainsaw, right now there's only one in the game.
Rocket launcher!
These skill and ability points I keep mentioning pertain to another odd aspect of this game. There are no levels. Kinda. In other words, you're not going to see anyone, player or enemy, walking around with a level 1 or level 25 over their heads. Instead, your strength is measured in the gear you're wearing, and the higher quality gear requires more skill points. Your earned experience is given towards skill and ability points, so you never level up as much as you just earn more points to spend. It's usually best to place your skill points in the 2 weapon sets you want to start out with, as well as keeping the head, minor, and major talisman skills updated so you can equip the better gear you find. Players in the game will often denote their skill level by the average quality level of the gear they have equipped, referred to as QL. So if someone wants to run an instance and tells you they are QL3, that means the majority of their gear is quality level 3. That's also a decent goal to reach before you wander into your first instance dungeon. Death in this game is handled very similar to World of Warcraft, but more of a slap on the wrist. Just like WoW, when you die, you enter a ghost world and can run back to your body, or resurrect at the Anima Well of your choice you respawn at. Unlike WoW, rezzing at the Anima Well won't incur you any penalty whatsoever. The only downside to death is having to repair your gear, but the cost is often inconsequential, and you'll more likely earn more money than you end up losing. One way you can't die in this game is falling. There is no falling damage in this game, which feels really odd coming from a lot of other world MMOs, but I don't exactly hate the idea or anything. Feel free to leap off of a building or a cliff if that's a quicker way than taking the stairs. The inventory system is fairly basic to MMOs, but it has a few differences. In order to access your equipment panel, press C and see what you have equipped. If you want to equip your second weapon, you'll have to drag it to that slot, as right-clicking a weapon in your inventory accessible by pressing I will only switch out your primary weapon. The exception being if you're upgrading the weapon of the same type that's already equipped to your second slot. Other slots include your head talisman, 3 major talismans, like a ring, a necklace, and a wristband, and 3 minor talismans, like a luck item, usually cards or dice, a belt, and an occult item like a bone. This lets you switch out more powerful gear without changing your look. Gear is categorized by the Holy Trinity again. There's gear that gives boost to your HP for tanks, damage for more DPS, and healing for healers. It's pretty obvious which one does what when looking at their stats, as the focus stat will usually be the most prominent, so choose accordingly. You can visit any merchant NPC to repair your gear, which requires packs for mana, the in-game currency. You can also sell your unwanted gear and items as well. To better organize your inventory, you can hit the plus on the corner to create a 10-slot bag that you can store specific items or gear in for easy access. You can also expand your inventory at any time for an increasing fee of packs for mana, maxing out at 200 separate slots. If you want to switch between a set group of weapons, items, and skills, you can head to gear loadouts on the character screen to save a set of your choice, as well as name it. This is useful for players that have a solo set, a dungeon set, and a set for tanking or healing. If you want to swap outfits, all outfits you've earned will be found in the dressing room, also accessible from the character screen. Just choose the item you want to wear and it'll display on your character, then click wear to switch to that outfit or clothing piece. This game is a very interesting crafting system that takes a page from Minecraft of all places. Throughout the game, enemies will drop things like base fire, water, or metal, all basic elements, each with their own properties. You'll also be able to loot or purchase toolkits, each linked to a quality level and a certain kind of material. Materials rank from base, then imperfect, normal, sacred, and finally pure. You can create the next quality material by placing 5 or more of a material to combine them into one. In order to craft weapons or talismans, you combine 7 or more of these items into a pattern representing the item you wish to build. Weapons use metal, but you can decide the properties of a crafted talisman by using other materials. For example, creating a ring out of fire will create an attack damage ring, but creating one out of water will turn it into an HP boosting ring. It's really an interesting and simple crafting mechanic that's a lot of fun to play around with. You can also further augment weapons and talismans with glyphs, which are easily slotted into place in the crafting window as well. Just place the glyph into the window with your weapon or talisman and voila, you're done. You can even craft glyphs using the various runes you'll collect. There are a few methods of fast travel in the game, the first being the previously mentioned sprint mechanic. Secondly, there's Agartha, a massive tree within the Hollow Earth containing portals to various places on Earth. Traveling in Agartha can be a bit annoying, especially when you need to get back to later areas, but getting back to the starting point is as easy as leaping off the edge of the world. One rather devious way to fast travel requires you to, well, as the kids on YouTube might say, kill yourself. Since you can choose to respawn at any unlocked Anima well on the map, you can simply die via enemies or by typing /reset into the chat, then pick the well you need to go to on the drop-down menu and simply res there. With this method, and the fact that dying ends up being a puzzle-solving element on occasion, it's understandable and a good thing that there's really no major penalty for dying. So, the quest system. It's a bit different from most MMO games. In MMOs, you can collect and stack a ton of quests in the same area and get them all done around the same time. In Secret World, however, you're severely limited to how many quests you can have. Specifically, one. Well, one main type quest, but there are shorter side missions scattered around, and you can have 3 of those at a time. You also have a massive story quest that guides you through the areas of the game with an overarching plot. Main quests actually come in 3 types. The normal quests have you going from objective to objective, perhaps killing certain enemies or locating areas and items, each with a small snippet of story. They're multi-tiered and usually take some time to complete. Next is sabotage missions, denoted by a time bomb icon. These quests actually favor stealth to combat, and often requires you to avoid traps, cameras, and enemies in order to complete them. They're an interesting spin on the formula and offer up some decent and occasionally frustrating in a good way sort of challenge. Finally, one of the most notable types of quests in the game, the investigation missions. These are denoted with a laptop icon and are based almost completely around puzzle solving. The clues and steps required to complete them are very subtle and vague, and many times you'll be forced to go outside the game to solve them. This can be accomplished with the in-game internet browser, and you can access it with the B key if you're not running dual monitors. This occasionally involves a bit of alternate reality gaming, like using the internet to input a URL that appears on a card or a billboard, and research the clues from there. Or even obtain a skill set not known to most people, like translating a Morse code or binary code message, or translating Arabic words to Hebrew. Sometimes you may need to research an author or topic just to try and guess a computer password from a vague hint. These take some serious research, guesswork, and brainpower to solve, but if you're completely lazy, you can just look up the solutions online as well. It depends on what you get the most enjoyment out of, but if you like games like Myst, you'll probably love this aspect of the Secret World. With the exception of investigation missions, all quests in this game can be repeated after a certain amount of time. Keep in mind that tougher puzzle elements can appear in any type of quest, too. There's small snippets of story scattered throughout the game as well in the form of lore pieces. These appear as small yellow honeycombs, and besides getting some story to read, collecting a few of these can unlock a lot of achievements and subsequent XP. Try not to pass them up. A common issue many people have with this game is it's fairly small for an MMO. There are only 3 main areas in the game, each with only 2 or 3 sections, and each faction follows the same story path, more or less. A lot of people say the game loses a bit of steam later on, which I'll admit I wasn't enjoying Egypt as much as I did Kingsmith, especially once I got to the City of the Sun God, but I enjoyed Transylvania much more, so it's probably a bit of personal taste. I still see this as a game to explore and build your character, not a rush to the endgame. Luckily, Funcom promises content updates on a monthly basis. So far, 3 have been released: Unleashed, Digging Deeper, and the Halloween event The Cat God. You get rewards for completing all the missions added to the update, and there's usually quite a few main investigation missions tossed in to keep you busy for a while. Although that whole monthly thing got a bit screwed up with the Digging Deeper update. That patch ended up getting delayed about several times and only ended up coming out about last month, and then the Cat God update was released only a week later after that. It's a bit of a work in progress, I guess. Still, there's some interesting promises coming with the next update, including the game's first raid dungeon involving an unearthly siege on the city of New York, among other fun additions, so I can't wait to see what's planned for the future. Although a good amount of this game can be played solo, there will be times you will need to group in order to succeed. Luckily, the faction choices don't lock you out of who you can talk or group with, and having servers linked means you can find anyone from anywhere to help you out. One issue I see with the group system is that loot windows will pop up to allow anyone in the group to roll, no matter how far away they are. It's not uncommon to be out on your own while waiting for a dungeon group to form, only to have an item drop, and then the guy halfway across the world rolls on the item and ends up winning it. If you're the type of person that likes to roll on loot windows despite you never taking part in the fight that earned that loot, you're a fucking douche. Don't do that. Finding groups can be done the old-fashioned way in chat, or a highly convenient looking for group option that allows you to list the dungeon or area you need a group in, as well as what role you're willing to fill. You can also browse others who've listed themselves and invite or message them immediately. I formed many a group pretty quickly this way. The most people you'll see in-game seem to hang out in Agartha, looking to do the Elite and Nightmare mode dungeons. Dungeons are pretty standard to MMOs and play a lot like the dungeons you'd see in WoW. You path along the area fighting the occasional enemy group until you reach a boss. The boss usually has a gameplay quirk and strategy to defeat them, and once down they'll drop some high-quality gear. An odd thing about dungeon gear, while most gear you find has a small smattering of stats for health and attack regardless of its main focus, dungeon gear is usually purely that one stat. You might be fully decked out in high HP gear from dungeons, but having them all on will make you practically do no damage. Alternatively, having nothing but high attack dungeon gear on will result in you having a very small portion of health. When solo, it's best to find a good balance of HP and attack power, and use dungeon gear sparingly. A common strategy is to have a high dungeon HP piece equipped to your head and use the attack items for the rest. Each dungeon also has an overarching quest with its own separate quest slot, and despite there being NPCs you can obtain these quests from, they're usually granted to you automatically once you enter. While they're also repeatable, you only get the item reward once, and subsequent trips will only net you some XP and some cash. Dungeon death is handled a bit differently as well. When killed, you res at the nearest anima well at the dungeon, and you're trapped there until the boss is defeated or the party loses. You can also repair your gear at any well, and if you're waiting to get back in, you can watch the rest of your party fight with a bird's eye view of the action. Each boss area is protected by a one-way shield, so you'll know when you're about to encounter one. Despite the 3-faction gameplay, the only PvP in the game is instanced, and similar to Guild Wars 2. It involves both a massive server-wide ongoing battlefield and smaller structured events. Certain servers seem more PvP action than others, and just like Guild Wars, the population of a certain group, in this case the faction, not the server, will usually be the one to hold the most ground. I'd swear I'm one of the last Illuminati players left on Cerberus. You can form guilds easily in this game, where they're called cabals. Forming one is as simple as typing the name, as there's no prerequisite or monetary cost to forming one. Right now, cabals are locked to one faction type only, and the community is pretty torn on whether or not it should stay that way. Cabal members can be cross-server, though. The people in this game are fairly decent. Dungeon runs, as far as I've experienced them, hardly degrade into blame games and name-calling, and most people would rather be helpful than insulting. Chats, however, can be pretty empty at times, and getting people to talk to you is something you'll probably have to initiate, but for the most part, people seem happy to help. That really seems to be part and parcel for these niche titles, and I personally prefer it that way. Sure, let the naysayers go on and say that this one's a failure, but I would much rather have a small group of helpful and decent patient players than a massive clusterfuck of asshats. From what I understand, there's a really good RP community as well. While I haven't run across any open RP in the game, there are a lot of players in the RP server Arcadia, and many character names seem well thought out, even if it seems like everyone is playing Templar. There's even talk in the next patch containing a roleplay theater, where groups of players will be given several minutes to enact a play on stage for others to watch, with audience participation allowing them to cheer or boo them off stage for more or less time. I'd love to see how this pans out. From what I also come to understand, with NCSoft's utterly fervent stance on killing City of Heroes, many players of that game have decided to migrate over to the Secret World. Knowing just how wonderful that community was in the game that they loved, I fully extend these former COH players a hearty welcome to this game. Just, do me a favor and stay far the fuck away from any Facebook pages this review might show up on, okay? Yes, I know, this has a cash op and it's a sub-game. Get over it. WoW and Ion did the same thing as sub-games, and I didn't hear anyone complaining. Much like the WoW shop, the majority of items in here are purely cosmetic. If you want some more clothing options or a small pet to follow you around, you can find some here for various prices. I will say they tend to be a lot cheaper than WoW is charging for similar items. You can also purchase character slots for $10 and server transfers for $20, although with cross-server grouping that seems kinda pointless unless you're just looking for better PvP pickings. The one thing, not so much purchasable in the cash shop as much as it's on the account page, that I really want is the lifetime account. For $200, the Secret World becomes subscriptionless for as long as the game is open. While thousands may make the joke that this game will probably be free to play or dead long before that becomes a worthwhile purchase, I don't care. I'd buy that shit even if the game became free to play next week. I like this game that much, but it's still an investment and a bit of a gamble. Otherwise, there's nothing of real note here. Funcom has admitted to having the tools to convert Secret World to free-to-play, but it's perfectly comfortable where the game is now. If you want to play this, you'll have to buy and you'll have to subscribe, and I know how hard of a sell that is these days. However, if what I've said about this game has intrigued you enough to at least try it, there is a trial available. You can play the game for 3 days, but if you end up completing 30 missions, which, trust me, isn't that hard to do, you'll gain an extra 2 days' time and 1,200 Funcom bonus points if you play full-time. Also, if you manage to complete the first dungeon, you'll also unlock a pretty powerful bonus item that doubles as an XP booster. Just head on over to thesecretworld.com and fill out the sign up for the trial block in the right-hand banner. Don't be afraid to say hi either. I've had quite a few people do that already. Okay, I've not done well to hide my enjoyment and personal preference for this game, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this game is not for everyone. There are many a reviewer and casual player willing to dismiss the game as sucks, and I can't tell them to feel otherwise, but hopefully with a bit more understanding of the game, more people may come to see it as an underrated gem, and not another Funcom failure as the media is all too quick to label it. Trust me, I haven't played World of Warcraft in over a year, and I thought this show had me completely done with subscription MMOs. Man, I was mistaken. Here's my final rating. If you're looking for an MMO with a different spin on character progression or gameplay mechanics in general, The Secret World might be up your alley. Also, if you're the type that loves a good, engaging, and well-written story, complete with a good bit of humor and dramatic tension, this is a title that gets it all right. You'll be quoting lines and picking favorite characters in no time. The game is heavy on atmosphere and horror, and considering that the first area, Kingsmouth, is in a perpetual state of Halloween, I figured it pretty fitting for this episode. If you want to get lost in the atmosphere, this is the game to do it. I also have to commend this game's community, that more often than not are quite a solid group of people. You might just make some new friends here. It's not free, and it needs to be subscribed to. You have to pay for it, so that's that, really. Again, I am very intrigued with the lifetime subscription option. This is probably the first game I'm highly considering doing that for. But again, population and numbers-wise, it's a gamble. This game didn't set its sights or its marketing on toppling WoW, but it's still not the performer that they'd hoped it would be. It's really the reason I'm doing this episode, after all. But if you're willing to at least take a peek, give that trial a shot. You'll experience all you need to in order to get a handle on whether or not this game is for you. Sometimes too much freedom is a bad thing, and despite the game's linear overall story, you're not entirely tied down to a set path of progression in level and skill, and some might not know what to do with that, or end up making choices that make their experience all the worse. There's a few issues with the game's presentation, like texture popping, or the characters' models, textures, and animations that seem to be turning off a lot of players who place a lot of value on graphics. If what you saw in this footage annoyed you, you're probably better off elsewhere. There isn't really that much explorable content when compared with MMOs like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2, so someone who likes to search vast worlds might not enjoy traversing around the same 3 locations, and might burn through the locations fairly quickly. Finally, if you're fully and unquestionably done with subscription MMOs, there is little I can do to change your mind. If you can't stand the idea of paying monthly, there's no other option right now, so you might not want to bother. Next time, don't worry, I'm back to numbered episodes and free-to-play games. Provided I can pull myself away from this one again.